Do it.
Welcome back to Conversations of the Leaky Cauldron, Episode 5, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Chapters 18 through 23, a big 120 or so, 115, 112, 100-something page reading. And back with me are Miss Sarah Miller and Mr. Wesley Schantz. Welcome back, my esteemed colleagues.
It's good to be back.
Happy New Year, y'all.
Happy New Year. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, this was a great break, and I remember reading this and talking with you guys. I vaguely remember doing this. I'm glad to be back with y'all.
Yeah, and I'm glad to have y'all
you guys
back.
Have all.
Yeah, go on.
I was just gonna say, you guys have all traveled, right? Wes went further than the rest of us. How was it? Did you have a good time on your trips?
Oh yeah, I just did no reading, that was the weirdest part probably. And it's really like relaxing, and then it's sort of like, I feel like I'm missing something after a while. So it's like such a integral part of who I am, I think. I didn't realize. So having like a break from it from a little bit has really reminded me of that. And just like how awesome it is when the weather is cold and, gloomy out like it is here in the Northwest right now, just like sitting down, just reading a book, that's such a simple pleasure. Something that I think is just one of my favorite things. So I don't know. How was your break?
Mine was good. For the first time in like 15 years, I didn't have to travel to be with my family at the holidays. And so that was actually a real treat, because it was a lot of reading and relaxing. And, I didn't feel pressed to spend time with, each and every one, like the characters in Harry Potter. It was an unusual Christmas this year, because I'm so used to my Christmas being kind of regimented and, like always a little too short from my perspective. So it was good.
That is interesting how your break shifts when you don't have to travel home. And I didn't travel home to Nashville this time around, but rather my girlfriend and I had guests from Nashville that came by, and it just makes me think of sort of just mixing what you said with, or conjoining what you say to what Wes said about traveling and being on break, and sort of the action patterns and routine of life, and how the routine at first is nice to get away from, but sort of calls you back to it. It is interesting the things we choose to do on break, because I do think it tells you something about you and perhaps which house you should be in. Because one thing I did is I outlined my 6 books of Milton for lecture for several reasons. 1, personal edification. 2, to really earn that expert classification when it comes to those 5 major epics which I teach. And but 3, also because I always use breaks as times to hone my skills in whatever craft I'm currently pursuing. So I always try to get fitter, and I always try to do more reading than usual. It's like I like to work harder, since I can work purely for myself and for the benefit of those people who I'm closest to, who I'm like buying presents for and running around for. And so it's interesting to what extent you become less or more yourself during a break. And so we get to see a lot of that with Harry, Ron, and Hermione this time around, right? Hermione likes the library still quite a bit, but Ron and Harry, they have exam. And just to make sure I have the continuity of the story right, the exams are coming at the end of break for them. I know that even though break had started, exams they still had ahead of them. So did they have them before Christmas? Do they have them after Christmas? It was my understanding that they should have been studying really hard for finals, but it was too fun during holidays and there's too much excitement to do that, so they weren't. But the finals are still coming. Is that correct?
I think so.
I don't know what.
Well, I thought so, but Harry's exempted from the finals. It's more like he should be figuring out his next hint, for the next task.
Right.
And the rest of them, I mean, I think they just have one big finals at the end of each school year, and that's
I thought they had an end. I thought they had an end of term sort of exam that was mentioned, because there was mention of the fact that all the classes stayed rigorous except for, I think, what was it, Flitwick's, where he had them doing funny charms, but that Moody and Snape were still hard on them. But it might be that I guess they have the owl soon or something like that. But I was under that impression. But you're right about Harry not having to worry about that. But that's also funny too about when you're on vacation, that you're never fully on vacation, that what Harry, like Ron, has lingering in the back of his head is that there is something he should be doing. And I wanted to ask you too, whether you ever had that feeling during break, that even from school, did you have like a research paper that you were supposed to be doing, though you knew you wouldn't, but it kind of lingered and was held over your head? Do you think that's what is happening here with Harry having this big task and this small reprieve from, but it's not a real reprieve, but he's making it a reprieve, but he could be working on it?
I mean, of course, especially as a teacher, I am always, there's always grading to do. And especially over the holidays, I collected an essay right before Christmas, and I graded a lot of them. I didn't grade all of them, and I should have, but it does sort of hover like a specter over your mind. That being said, I think one thing that's great about the holidays is I can forget about it. I can, like you said, kind of immerse myself in the things that really make me feel like the best version of myself, because I have time. And I mean, I think what most of them have, so it seems at the start of chapter 23, is they just have a lot of homework that they were assigned around Christmas time. And, I certainly often have grading that hangs over my mental landscape, and I do my best to avoid it. And I claim that is work-life balance, even though the reality is it's just not work-life balance. That's a misnomer. I'm just avoiding it. Yeah.
Especially around the holidays, though, that's part of the point, right? Like, you sort of get to have the world be a little topsy-turvy for a little bit, and that's like important too, right? And I don't know, it's everything needs a balance, including like being a little out of balance, is how I kind of think about it. And this portion of the book made me feel like a lot of anxiety, like a lot of nerves, both with the task, facing the dragon, just like waiting around in the tent before that happened. I was like, oh man, this is stressful. And then especially with the Yule Ball, like, oh man, what intense, like, discomfort, like remembering what it was like to be at a dance and like feel expectations and like, have to ask people out or dance or whatever. Like, all of that stuff was so stressful, and it I think it captures it really effectively there, by like comparing it to a dragon fight. Like, this is worse.
Right, the next dragon to face, the other dragon of nature, the other major threat, the force of selection.
Take it easy. We're not the dragons, all right?
In that you are the holders of nature and the principal selectors of the next generation. That in that way, the dragon. But
okay.
But I do think the dragon is a symbol of it is a good and a bad symbol, in that it is a symbol of wisdom. And so it is
there is like that, like the protecting the egg thing. And that the egg has a message, but it's hard to, there is kind of like an overtone, now that you guys draw that comparison.
That is interesting,
thinking about what I know will come. And like Harry having to like disrobe to understand the egg seems awfully sexual.
And it does get that element from Myrtle, right? We haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
Like, that's for sure there.
I was wondering if, Wes, you said that like the holidays are a time where kind of things get turned upside down. I mean, do you see any of that kind of alongside the anxiety that you were describing, that like things are like topsy-turvy or thrown out of whack or out of balance? I think that that's interesting based on what I was seeing as well.
Well, yeah, and one small way, or maybe not small way, that you see this in the book at least is with like Harry, who's always, a pretty strong student, like natural ability wise, and suddenly there's this charm, the accio, right, like bringing things to him. It just doesn't work, like he can't get it, and he's like just very flustered by that. I think I could really relate to that because, in school I generally didn't have to work too hard at a lot of things. But then you come to a certain point, like call it fourth year, like in the books here, or whatever stage in school, like eventually you come to a point where you do actually have to kind of study. For me, a lot of that was foreign languages, and that was something that I really liked, like one of my favorite things of all. But I really did have to, sit down and work at it a lot more than I did with other subjects. And I really liked the way that Harry is shown, staying up all night, not for a test, not exactly for, the normal sort of written test, but for this performance that he has to do in front of everyone. Like the whole school is watching, all three schools are watching. He has got to get this thing figured out. And he just does as much as he can, and his friend is there, Hermione, helping him along the way. I thought that was like a really affirming kind of example of like, okay, so you're pretty good at stuff, but you still have got to put in some hard work, right? And like, the habits that you have formed so far are not adequate to this. You've got to like stretch yourself. You've got to really go further and break some new ground with your studies here. I think it's a pretty cool example of all that sort of thing.
Well, I like that for several reasons because, just to jump in with that, just because this is the first time he's ever really had to perform with nobody who will support and take his back at the school. That he's, even when he was facing, and I guess at the end of 3, he faced the Dementors by himself. But that was sort of a supreme and incredible act on his part. Usually he had Lupin behind him, right? Now he has to perform, and he has to perform publicly. So that was an element missing last time. There was somebody there, Hermione, but not not a bunch of other people. And so it just strikes me that as an educator, at our school, we have a senior exhibition where the seniors have to perform in front of community members and, a variety of people. And they take it very seriously, and they get very worked up and nervous about it because there seems to be nothing more humiliating than not performing in front of, strangers, in front of public members who are not your immediate family. And that, Harry would have to face that, and B, that would be what would actually make him work hardest for it. I think that is sort of part of the key to the education, and I don't know if it's implemented correctly, but I think that is the idea behind project-based learning, that if you actually have to produce something that is then exists in the world that people can judge, you tend to want to do the best possible thing. We're so self-conscious about what they'll say, and that's what brings the best out of Harry here, actually working to learn this charm so he can face this dragon, which is what maybe public opinion or something that hides the treasure. I don't know. Maybe he has to look inside himself for something more in order to meet this threat. I'm not sure, but I agree. And sorry to have thrown that in there, Sarah, but I just couldn't help it.
No, I know. I think that's exactly what I was gonna head towards, is this idea that at our school we call it the culture of performance. That like all content areas kind of abide by this pedagogical philosophy that you don't really know it until you can do it in front of other people.
Right.
And in fact, that might be one of the more, if not the most, preparatory way of assessing someone's knowledge or skills or combination thereof. And I tell my students that a paper is a performance. It's just a performance for me. Doing something, executing a combination of skills and that brings to bear a variety of knowledge areas in a timely fashion in public or in front of some audience seems to be like a really useful skill. And I think one thing that kind of also raises the stakes for him is that not only is it public in front of like not one school, but three, but it's also public in front of people who are kind of hoping that he fails. And,
right.
And that, that's part of what throws him off in his learning is that there is a passage, I think, in like the first or second chapter that we read for today, where it says, there had been a time in his second year when people thought he was the heir of Slytherin and they avoided him, but he always had his friends. And now not having Ron for a period of time, like you said, I think it made him find a lot more within. Like he had to do a lot more on his own. And of course he had Hermione and he had Professor Moody helping him. But I think the other two pieces of that time period in the story that I think are interesting, just because this is a time in his life, a real crucible where he's increasingly alone and increasingly threatened. And it seems like lacking the safety of friendships and, teachers who don't use terrible curses, as well as having like an increased level of danger in his life. That's sort of, it shouldn't surprise us that that's when you see a little bit more stumbling, but also when you see a little bit more rising. And I'm particularly interested in why it is so easy for him to decide to tell Cedric about the dragons. And like, it occurs to him that he should do it. And he kind of doesn't even really second guess that instinct. And I think that that's super interesting. Like that moral intuition is not something, he doesn't weigh all of the consequences that like to my knowledge at least, or to my memory. And then I think the other thing that is a theme that I saw that I just wanted to throw out there all at once, and I know that this is a lot of me, but is this theme of like changing one's appearance. I think that's a really important part of performance, is like trying to become like a fuller version of yourself in front of other people. There's like the canary creams that change your appearance. And then there's a discussion of a variety of different charms that change your appearance to varying degrees. Hagrid's changing his appearance, and Hermione changes her appearance. And there's these temporary and seemingly more permanent transformations. And then there's the cosmetic and maybe also the internal transformations. But I guess I was kind of surprised that Harry so easily gave Cedric the clue. I don't know why that surprised me. And I don't know if it surprised you all, but he did so without thought. It was just obvious that he should do so, and he went ahead and executed. That seems quite mature.
Yeah, and in line with this character. I have a comment on that, but I also just quickly wanted to say, because you made me think of this, is that what's interesting in this book is that there is this like a rising sexuality in it, or this tension between the sexes, that like even with this ball showing up, right? And it is Minerva, wisdom, who is going, the goddess of wisdom, who is going to sort of initiate them into this dance. And this dance is, of course, sort of a very sophisticated version of a mating dance, right? And because it's a man and a woman, and they're supposed to, get into rhythm with each other and to learn how to sort of engage with each other. And so you also find with the increasing sort of carnal knowledge like that, and we see people in the bushes kissing and things like that, an increase in the knowledge of danger with Harry. And that just makes me think that this is sort of making the Miltonic sort of point about the garden, that with increasing understanding of the world, or through the understanding of carnal knowledge, which is also the understanding of the fact that one will die, one starts to understand just how dangerous the world is as well. So with your greater wisdom comes greater understanding of the dangers of the world, the timor Dei, the fear of God being the beginning of wisdom. It's so interesting on the American cover in the left hand, just to add some funny Freudian bit to this. You have Harry with his wand, highly masculine image, and in his right hand a golden womb-like dragon egg, which is a highly feminine image. And those seem to be the combination of the feminine and the masculine. It's sort of like a yin yang image, and one is up and one is down, and there's a dragon sort of tail in front of it, which is actually a horned tail, which I do think supports this interpretation.
That's cool. I like the kind of mixture of topics which are coming out here, and the way that this seems to work. Yeah, it does seem to have something to do with knowledge and Harry's insight, or his character, or whatever it is that inspires him to go and share this knowledge with the one person who's kind of in the dark about it at this point, which is Cedric. I think that the irony of this is raised a bit when you think about how Harry has been compared to Cedric before and found wanting, right, by losing that Quidditch match, right? And Cedric's dad is all very much reminding of us of that at the start of this book, back at the Quidditch World Cup, and then later, a few chapters later, when people are trying to get dates to the dance, Cedric has asked the girl that Harry wanted to ask but couldn't nerve himself up to do it, right? And she had accepted already, right? So in this way, that makes this moment the more surprising in hindsight, maybe. And Harry, to the point where he doesn't want to take Cedric's advice in turn later about the egg, right? He doesn't want to
exactly
use this hint that he's given. He doesn't want to feel like he's in any way, less than Cedric at figuring something out. So he wants to maintain that superiority. It's tough.
Yeah, you just gave me an insight too, just as a symbolic interpretation. It's precisely because Cedric is faster than Harry that he's beaten him both these times, right? He was faster on the broom, and though we could say he just had a less traumatic thing that kept him from catching the snitch, but as the seeker, that's how it's interpreted. That even if it was Harry falling off and it not being his fault, it's still his fault. He's still the seeker, and he lost to Cedric. And also here with Cho, it looks like she would have wanted to go with Harry again had he done it in the proper time, maybe. But Cedric was faster, and it just makes me think of how the text will eventually end, which is when they finally catch up with each other, one has to disappear, which makes me think of, I've talked so much about Harry being sort of the ultimate ideal as a hero, and I think what you both are putting your finger on is that what's best about him isn't his intellect, but his sense of fairness and fair play. He seems to like that, though he doesn't want to give the benefit of the doubt to Cedric, which is funny. He doesn't even want to think correctly about what it is Cedric said. He wants to deliberately misunderstand it. But it makes me think that Cedric is in a way the ideal of Harry too. He's the one beyond him that, he kind of has, and he's handsome and he's beloved by all the fans at Hogwarts, and Cho wants to go to the dance with him, and he won that Quidditch match, and he's supposedly a very advanced magician at this time, or wizard, excuse me. Don't mean to be rude.
And
yeah.
And he has a loving family that we met at the beginning, and
wow, yeah.
They seem
yeah.
Right. I think it's weird that, up until this point, I guess I haven't gotten out of Harry Potter himself as a character that fair play is important. Maybe because he seems to always be in a position to call something unfair. right? He's the underdog, or he's the one who's being hunted unfairly and whatnot. But like, fair play is or caring about fairness and, an even playing field. That's a quality of a Hufflepuff more than it is a quality of a Gryffindor, I think. At least that's how I understood it. But I'm still, I think I'm still just kind of in awe of how maybe it was, that was his way of trying to like compete with Cedric, to say like, all right, you might be faster and better looking and smarter and taller and in all the other ways superlative compared to me, but I'm gonna do the right thing. I know more than you, and I'm gonna let you know it. Maybe that was the only card he had in his hand or something. But that's even Cedric is kind of surprised that Harry tells him. What I also think is interesting is that in the task, Harry does better than Cedric, which
So
I personally didn't remember, and I was surprised by.
I didn't remember that either, especially because I don't think that's included in the movies. But
Right.
No,
yeah.
Cedric gets really injured in defeating the dragon.
Yeah, and I think that supports your point about him sort of reversing the roles a little bit, right? Like he goes kind of head on to challenge the dragon, which seems like a sort of Gryffindorish thing to do, possibly, whereas Harry does something a little more sort of nuanced or kind of conversational, even, right? By convincing the dragon to get up off the eggs and then sort of swooping in once he's done that.
Yeah, and what do you think of what did y'all make of Sirius saying that he would use a conjunctivitis charm? Do you think that relates at all to just multiple references back to him being on like a tropical island and using a conjunctivitis charm, him being potentially like a representative of an alcoholic or just like an uncle who likes to drink? But also that I thought it was interesting how wise he was, that he says, and because the eyes are the weakest part of a dragon, of course, and just dropping that knowledge, and just, it would be helpful to have his focus, right? He focuses in precisely on the weak spot of the dragon, and that's incredible too. So maybe he embodies those two different aspects of the father, or the positive and the negative masculine images.
That was a really interesting moment, I think, when he's on the point of telling Harry his solution to the dragon, which turns out to be the one that Victor Crumb uses, right?
Yes.
And gets some points docked because the dragon stomps around and smashes some of the eggs. And so Harry's solution ends up being a little bit more, skillful, actually. And the one that Sirius was suggesting is the one apparently that Karkaroff must have suggested to his student, right? So it's again this kind of real interesting web of intentions, of strategies, of purposes at work here. I think also that moment, is so striking because Ron comes down and seems like he's on the point of trying to make a rapprochement there, like kind of mend fences, and Harry is so upset because it scared Sirius away and he didn't get to hear what he was about to say, that he's in the worst possible mood for making up with Ron and it just makes everything so much worse. It's rough.
Right. And so let's talk a little bit about the Yule Ball. One thing, or not only about the Yule Ball, but also about Hermione. So just to loop back to Hermione, a couple things that happened here. She gets asked to the dance by Victor Crumb, one of the champions, and she gets done up very beautifully. Just before this, because because of something bad that had been done to her, something good ends up happening. Malfoy curses her and makes her front teeth get larger and larger, which she's already self-conscious about, which you might see as a metaphor for drawing attention to someone's flaw through insult and how consequently self-conscious they become of that. But then Madame Pomfrey is fixing her teeth, and Hermione allows her teeth, which were at one time more like buck teeth, bigger front teeth, or protruding, they're described as, getting down to normal size. And this has a real effect on her. And then she does her hair up in a certain way and is done beautifully up. And you see this transformation, just like Odysseus, who I just taught about today in book 6 of the Odyssey, experiences a transformation when he goes from sort of guy with leafy branch over him and the salt brine and other leaves on him to handsome middle-aged man in the presence of Nausicaa. And so with Hermione, we see two things that I didn't expect. But one is that she allows physical transformation to happen to her in sort of a plastic surgery or dental sort of way, which she says she just won't tell her parents about. I don't know how she's going to hide it, though. And but also that she gets such looks of disbelief from, I think it was Harry, I believe Harry's state, one of the Patils. I can't remember whether it was, is it Parvati is her name, and Padma is her sister?
Yeah.
Ravenclaw?
Yeah, that's her name.
Okay, good. And she just looks very unflatteringly at Hermione, and I believe what's described as an unflatteringly shocked way. And Hermione, and also Harry and Ron seem to see her differently, and especially Ron, who's in a terrible mood all night during the Yule Ball, apparently because of just how beautiful Hermione is, and possibly also out of some major resentment at the quality of guy that she's there with, whom he loves. And so I just wanted to bring that situation up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that the other thing that she does is straighten her hair, so that the other physical quality of hers that got her noticed by people. Like, that's something that, what's her name, Pansy in Slytherin House would sometimes make fun of her for.
Her bushy hair.
So she allows Madame Pomfrey to change her teeth, but she herself fixes her hair. And I mean, on its own, like, girls get dolled up for a dance. That's not like a huge deal, but I think up to this point, we would have expected Hermione to kind of be more like, no, like, screw the patriarchy. Like, I'm fine as I am, right? Like, because of how kind of, radical she is with SPEW, or the House Elf Liberation Front, as it's now called. But she engages in this frivolity, and in like these traditional gender roles. And I also think it's interesting that she doesn't tell the boys who asked her. Like, she almost she knows that it will make her more impressive to them if they just like get surprised. Like, she keeps it a secret, right? Which tells me either she's ashamed that she's going with Victor, or she's really proud and kind of wants the surprise to give her some kind of social credit. And I don't know. I find that not out of character, because it's Hermione and hard to say something's out of character if it actually happens to the character, but just a new dimension of her.
Right. She seems to be,
I don't know.
She has depths undiscovered, just like we know from the gifts that she gives. That it's not simply that she's like being socialized in a certain way. I would say that different aspects of her being are manifesting, and she's becoming richer and fuller. And it's funny because the boys, they can't recognize this because she's their friend. And so what they see her as is their friend. And so when they see her as beautiful date to Victor Crumb, in fact, the line that Harry is given is, he didn't recognize that girl, or he didn't know who that girl was. And then the next page, it's, wait, that's Hermione. He sees her in a totally different way, in a different context, dressed in this manner. He's like, oh my goodness, my friend who's just like my friend is like actually this very beautiful young woman now. And Ron seems to be getting hit by that like a load of potatoes as well.
I feel so bad for Ron here because he doesn't even realize, it seems like, what's happening to him. You know, like he really seems to genuinely think that he's upset that she's with Victor because Victor is from a different school, because he's, you know, the enemy or whatever. And he doesn't even catch a glimpse of the fact that he wanted to ask Hermione to the dance. Like, it really seems to be so beneath his radar or whatever at this point. And I think it is for Harry too. Like, I don't know that Harry is able to quite tell that that's what's going on either. Even as he watches Cho dance with Cedric and feels, you know, the same thing, this kind of like a non-directed, vague sense that he has like somehow completely missed the boat here at this great event where it's supposed to be like fun and everyone seems to be having fun and he's not. You know, it's rough. I think it's something that really is interesting to have kind of in the center of this big book. I think this is a point, Sarah, that you'd brought up a while ago, maybe about the structure, right, of these stories and how we're kind of approaching like the midpoint of the whole series. What would it be, you know, to have this sort of moment of kind of transformation, like we're talking about, and like realization, be part of that turning point in the series? How interesting that is like connected with, you know, the overt appearance of Voldemort again, to as like a force which, you know, you have to sort of name and reckon with finally after all these years. It's a weird, you know, and that's all mixed up with Christmas too, and the weird sisters playing like Fate, you know, sort of they're rocking out. I don't know. It's like, it's really weird, really interesting.
Yeah. So that comment you made earlier, Alex, about like knowledge of the body and knowledge of evil kind of coexisting and happening in the same place just after the fall, I think is all the more, even more like clear to me how it connects to the Yule Ball. I think one thing that's different though is that like when Ron is angry, he's angry at the object of his affection, right? Like Harry is angry at the one who he thinks is taking his place with Cho, like he's jealous, right? Whereas Ron's anger, like he never directs his anger at Victor. Maybe Ron is afraid he's going to get beat up, but Victor, I think, is a kind of a scrawny guy. But like, I think it's interesting, like who they direct their anger at, because I think it maybe reflects a little bit about where their anger actually belongs, or what it actually is a reflection of. Like one might be like a genuine sense of envy, and one might be shame at being slow. I was really glad to see Ron come to his senses about Harry not putting his name in the Goblet of Fire, I'll be honest. And I like the fact that they were friends again, made me kind of happy. But this kind of behavior made me very mad at him. I don't know, like, well, I know, yeah. Ron is a subject of contention between me and Wes, but that is so immature. I mean, it is like completely lacking in emotional quotient or EQ, right? Like he has no self-knowledge. And I got angry in that scene.
Well, and what seems to be part of what's going on, especially in the Gryffindor common room when Harry walks in on their second scene together, is that it's almost as if what Ron is imploring from Hermione is that she have understood what it was that he wanted. And they sort of do embody these conventional roles in that on this issue, she is unwilling to go that extra mile. He has to go the extra mile in this particular one. He's the one that needs to step forward and ask her, and he needs to ask her at the right time in accordance with who she is, you know? a champion asked her out, and much sooner than he did. And so that's what's got to happen if he's going to move forward in that way. And I do think it's very interesting, and I like that she takes a stand. She does give him that carrot, though, at the end, right? Next time, ask me sooner. That is not a closed door by any means, young Rom. That seems like an open invitation. Mm-hmm. Even though I don't know how often balls happen, but it's, she's essentially saying, yeah, I'll probably say yes if you do it right, but you must do it right. And it's, again, another instance of responsibility that these boys have to take in order to perform the role of man or gentleman or wizard. And just as in the dance, they have to, take their role. So in order to get the person to go to the dance, they have to enact the role appropriately. Hermione seems to be honoring this.
Well, and I think what's interesting, too, is that, like, Hermione has a great time, right? And the two boys who don't, like you say, just to use that language, they don't perform their role. They don't have a good time. They don't even dance. Aside from the opening dance where I guess Harry has to, they don't. Like, I think at some point there's a boy from Beauxbaton or Beauxbaton, whatever, the French school, who comes over and asks Parvati to dance, and she's super eager to go, and they make a date later. But, like, they don't actually rise to the occasion of playing the role of man in this scenario. They just, like, get dressed up and pretend. And I think maybe that sort of ties back to something that I was thinking about as I was, like, reading and listening to these chapters, was how much change is cosmetic. And, like, for Hermione, she has a great time. She goes on a nice date with a really popular boy. And yes, she undergoes some physical transformations, but she's also undergoing, like, a personal transformation by letting loose and having fun and standing up for herself. Not that she has a problem with that on her own, but, maybe relaxing a little of her extreme principles, along with relaxing her hair. She is experiencing authentic transformation. Whereas, and Harry did too, when he learned how to master a summoning charm without the help and with the pressure of the task, right? And so he was able to perform the new role, and then the role that he performed became a part of him, and so he had to reach for the next role to perform. And because he didn't undergo some, like, genuine transformation, the performance falls flat. It feels fake and merely cosmetic, or merely a costume, right?
Precisely.
I think there's so much transformation happening. And I think that's a good way to connect it.
And I think what you're nailing on the head, and this is, the hardest Jungian principle to understand, what Jung says about marriage is that the only reason it works is because two things are eternally tied together, and so they have to transform in order to make it work. And so I think what you're laying out here is the power of roles and why it's important to play a role, because the better you play the role, the better an experience you have and the richer your existence. And that seems to be what Hermione's good at. This is why we're so bad at defining her, because she's not good at just a certain skill set. She's good at embodying the appropriate role to the situation, right? As student, top. As dancer or person who gets asked out to go to ball, top. As giver of gifts to friends, top. As giver of help to friends, top, because we've seen the gifts she gave to Harry, as we've also seen her work for not only the House Elf Liberation Front, but also for Hagrid and for Buckbeak. What she does, plays roles well. And so what I think you see is maximal transformation and maximal embodiment of virtue by her, precisely because those roles exist for someone to play as well as possible in order to bring into existence as many good things as possible. And I think that's what she does much better than these boys here. And I think that's what makes you, and probably me, and maybe Wes too, upset at them, because they don't rise up. They don't embody the role. They don't bring anything good into existence. In fact, Ron's just making fights everywhere, and the only reason Harry doesn't tell him he's completely wrong is that he's been enjoying having him back as a friend. But I totally agree that they fail to embody those roles, and that they're really missing out because of that.
I found it really interesting how Ron sort of shows how to go too far the other direction too. Like when he runs across Fleur as she's like putting the mojo on someone else, right? And it like whaps him, and he just like blurts out that he wants to go to the dance with her. And so it's like he's got the idea, he just can't, do it in a different way than Harry with the person he actually would like to go with, and he waits too long. With Ron, it's like he asks, but it's just at the complete wrong time and the complete wrong person, right? It's not the person that he truly would like to go with. So there's that.
First stabs, yeah.
Which again, really to me endears him to me more than anything. But also there's Hagrid and Madame Maxime in the Rose Garden.
Yeah.
That I think is another interesting way of seeing how you can overshoot, as well. Like Hagrid shares a little too much, a little too soon, and it goes badly for him there. Again, this was another moment where I was like feeling a lot of anxiety as I read, because I was like, this is so uncomfortable to overhear, because Hagrid is just one of my favorite characters, and he's just messing up so bad right there, and yet it's so heartfelt, and he completely misreads, how Maxine is gonna react. So I think, it's interesting how we're shown all these different ways, very instructive for young men reading this book, right? All the different ways you can do this poorly, right? And how it's supposed to work by inference.
And so I guess it's,
I think,
what is it, the Hufflepuff captain or the Ravenclaw captain who gives us the best idea, right? Just be charmed by Fleur and do exactly as she says, and you'll end up in that rose bush later. Go on, Sarah.
I was just
Roger
going to say, I was gonna say, I don't know that you're given a lot of good like how-to tips, but from like inferring the by absence. Well, if you don't do this and don't do that, maybe you'll find your way. But I think one thing that struck me as interesting in the garden with Hagrid and Madame Maxine is it Maxime with an M or Maxine with an N? I don't know, but I think Maxime with an M.
Yes.
As in monstrously large.
Right.
I think that we were talking about this maybe a couple pods ago when Beauxbaton was introduced, that like all of the other schools, the names are kind of a fusion of these two words. And Durmstrang was sort of like one extreme, like hyper masculine, and austere in its living quarters and living in the water. And Beauxbaton was sort of a little bit more feminine, very flourished and comfortable and almost grandiose in its living quarters, and that Hogwarts was sort of like maybe the middle course, rewarded for having a second champion as like the winner of the anyway. But one of the things that we talked about was that it's interesting that Beauxbaton has so many like half or mixed breed students, right? Like Fleur is part Vila and its headmistress is maybe part giant. But what's interesting is like how she is so resistant to that, like to accepting that kind of difference in somebody else. Like she's offended by it, right?
That's so good.
And that like almost as if she can't admit where she comes from. So she just, maybe covers it in like black satin, or maybe like manipulates the affections of Hagrid to get information about the tournament, like uses her difference or her, even like her identity to get things out of people, as opposed to like owning who you are. And at least in the Rita Skeeter chapter, there's a quote where Hagrid says, like, I am who I am, right? And that seems to be like a really important part of A, like courage, and B, also like transformation in the healthy way, like growing into a better version of yourself as opposed to pretending to be somebody that you're not, which I just was really struck by the fact that she is so resistant to this thing where when initially we thought that they might be the house that's more like far more liberal minded than Durmstrang or Hogwarts.
I wanted to ask about that because since they are so ornate and elegant, do you think that they are over ornate and elegant in order to hide what they are self-conscious about, and that it is sort of a pathology in that respect, and that perhaps this is an English comment on the French, that they are in some way wanting and so they make things over ornate? But back to the original point, I think certainly with Beauxbaton, that's there. Do you think that they are touchy because they are insecure and they wish to look even more beautiful and to be covered in grace, precisely because they want to focus on that rather than what is the source of their insecurities?
Well, that was my question, born of her reaction, that like, and I think that that's fair, especially if we've been considering, Durmstrang and Beauxbaton as sort of kind of poles, shall we say, and Hogwarts
right,
sort of in the middle, right? In a variety of ways, right? In the degree to which it accepts different kinds of people. I mean, Hogwarts accepts a lot of different kinds of people, but clearly there is still this faction within the Hogwarts student body that would like a more pure student body, right? Like the continual references to mudblood. Like, so Hogwarts is like leaning into kind of the mess or the chaos of like all the things that people truly are, whereas the impulse towards purity or covering up impurity and pretending like that is pretending like it's acceptance, when in reality it's not even really tolerance. It's like faux tolerance, provided you don't really fly your flag, right?
It's covering it up. It's hiding it, like obscuring it.
Yeah. Or using it when it's helpful, but not owning it, right? So like,
now that is so sophisticated, Sarah.
Like Fleur turns on her Vila-ness when she wants,
right?
When she wants the best date, when she wants to bewitch whomever, right? Or Madame Maxine, like, I mean, if I'm Hagrid, I think that woman's into me, right? Like she kind of leads him on. And, I think like those two ways of dealing with what they're calling impurity, but we'll just call diversity, right? Like either eliminating diversity altogether or making it only like the thing that you trot out as like a means to an end, but not like a reflection of like the beauty of creation, like accepting it, loving it, embracing it, leaning into it, and all of the things that it means, all of the complexity, the difficulty, the conflict, the mess, the tension that diversity can create. Like the world is diverse. The created world is diverse. And to pretend it is otherwise is to deny something, either to try to purify and make everything uniform, or to just like hide the the brokenness and and like the imperfections, or not imperfections is the wrong word, but things that are different, and pretend like they're not there. Neither of those two things are successful strategies, right?
It is, yeah, and it's amazing to what extent you put your finger on the button that true diversity comes from recognizing one's own flaws, or that which causes one self-consciousness. Like Viktor Krum noticing that he has rounded shoulders is probably something important for him to understand, with posture coming on later. But that true diversity doesn't come from fascistically all doing, hiding oneself in the same way in order to embody the same type. I won't even say ideal, in order to become the same thing, but in rather each person. And, I just taught the sphere of Mercury for Dante. And one of the points made by Justinian is that, the beauty of heaven is augmented by the diversity of notes within it, just like the diversity of notes within a song adds to the beauty of a song. So, true diversity, which recognizes the reality of the diversities between people, is the most beautiful thing that exists, because that is, the work of either nature or God, depending on which angle you want to come from, but equally beautiful in both conceptions. And that to hide what one actually is actually a very, I would say, unchristian and unphilosophically sort of sound thing to do, and also unsocial thing to do. It's precisely because, or just to add to that, because these people are also being unethical about using the gifts that they have, but also trying to have it both ways, and that they want to use the gifts from the sides of them that they take shame in, but they also want to not have that shame as well. So they're two-faced in a way, which is literally what they are, right?
And I think it's interesting, because alongside that, you have Hermione, for whom, like, she fixes her teeth and she straightens her hair, or Harry works on, self-development by learning this charm that's going to, save his life. Or, to me, I think I recognize sometimes that we put teenagers like we put a lot of pressure on them, right? We say, like, accept who you are, but be a better version of yourself, or, figure it out, but ask for help. All of these things, like these paradoxes that we expect them to navigate. On the one hand, it is really valuable that they learn to navigate the world for themselves, and like safe environments where failure can be instructive and stuff like that. But, there are a ton of like conflicting messages, like, and maybe that's something that Harry and Ron stumble with at the ball, that like, you have to lean into transformation, but that's not the same as like, or like personal growth. But that's not the same as like casting aside parts of yourself that you're afraid other people won't like. And that's not the same as like just conforming, right? Every teenager desperately wants to fit in, but they desperately want to stand out. So where do they fit? Where do they stand? How does that affect their social interactions? I mean, it's all they think about, and all they are not thinking about subconsciously that's affecting their decisions. We all see it every day, right? Like how this affects them. I think it's interesting, like how those two houses handle different, how Hogwarts handles different, and like how it's really hard to articulate a roadmap for growth that also acknowledges the virtue of, and the beauty of, and the importance of imperfection, but also perfecting oneself, or like moving towards something better, while also like appreciating the things that are not the superlative about you,
Right. The things that cause one to be self-conscious. Yeah, Wes.
Oh, I was thinking with respect to this about the ways that Hermione doesn't spell this out for Ron and Harry, right? She just sort of displays it and lets them observe it. And I think that is probably ultimately a much more effective way of teaching them. They probably weren't going to be able to accept it if she had just sort of tried to break it down, articulate it, say it to them. They had to sort of go through this. I think it's interesting, though, that she does do it in a way with her work with the house elves, right? And as she says, Professor Binns is there telling them about this with the goblins. Like every day in history class, they should be hearing how important diversity is and have respect for other beings if they were actually listening to the terrifying abilities of these goblins in their rebellions over the years. But alas, they are too busy worrying about other stuff during History of Magic. And I can totally I can totally relate.
Okay.
When she mentioned Professor Binns, I immediately thought of you, Wes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Immediately.
So we're starting to run towards that time, and so I have our magical question of the week for you too, if you're ready for it. Which magical ability, which New Year's resolution regarding restricting your use of magic would you fail on first?
What?
I think if I were to restrict myself as far as using magic to transport myself and other things, I would break that most quickly. That is obvious. Yeah.
So your resolution would be, I want to use magic less to do. Here, I'll give a form just so that we all understand what I'm asking. My resolution would be not to use magic to grade my students' essays. And I would give up on that resolution the first day of school.
Yeah. I guess I don't see the virtue maybe of not using magic to travel. So I'll have to think about that some more.
I think the virtue is in restraint, not the thing that's being restrained, but that's what the argument is.
Yeah,
well, Alex,
I'm bad at New Year's
resolutions. I don't know. This is a tricky one. You kind of took mine. I would definitely break that.
I've been using that one lately.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. Maybe I made a New Year's resolution to cook more food like healthily and for myself rather than and that's real. That, by the way, is a primary world resolution, not just in Harry Potter world, but to eat out less. And if I were in the magical world, maybe my resolution would be better ingredients, shall we say. And I think I could break that one pretty quickly. Though I'm really fascinated in learning how cooking works in the magical world. I don't understand it, and I'd be interested to hear.
It's amazing all the things they don't know about that you would think they would have to, but yeah.
I think mainly you look down at your plate and you shout pork chops or superior pork chops or whatever it is you want.
All right. And so, Wes, do you have any sort of resolution to use magic for something less than you usually do, or travel?
maybe again to be faster at getting back to people about things. If I were to use magic in some way to keep myself on a better schedule with keeping in touch with people, I again would just revert to reading books and sitting around and just doing things that were immediate, I think, rather than doing that hard work of reaching out to people and keeping in touch with them. So yeah.
Maybe put your remember all in the desk for a little while, then leave that away. Got to do it by your own merits now. No Nevilling with it.
All right.
So, all right, y'all. That was a lot. So, till
Good
next
work.
So
time.
what's next?
Oh, yes. So, we got to 23. Let's take a look at this because we got a pretty long book in our hands and a pretty long book ahead of us, which I'm very eager to get to. Not to, trade the present for the future too much, but, well, 24,
Do you think
25,
we
26.
can?
Okay, very good. Getting up through the second task. What were you thinking, Sarah?
I was just going to say, I think we should at least get through the second task.
Okay. Yeah. Wes?
That sounds doable.
Sweet. Okay, Rita Skeeter's Scoop, the Egg, and the Eye, and the second task. I'm looking forward to reading this and talking it through with y'all.
All right. Take it easy.
All right.
Take it easy.
Have a good night, fellas.
Good night.